So let's get stuck into it. I'm not going to go too much into this because I think Phil's done a good job of sort of sharing who we are. The only thing I will say is that our focus and priorities on the conversation, be that one that you're trying to encourage by out-of-bound comms, or those that are coming back to you, perhaps via a service channel. We've built, and the foundation is really on that two-way conversation. We're also responsible for really important conversations, and I think when I use this really slide, I might mention that we have UK police forces, NHS, but actually, and there's a point that I'll touch on later, the conversations that we're having as HAs are actually becoming more and more, and I say important, it's the sentiment's changing, and actually they're becoming more challenging, and we're really aware that we're responsible for people's health, people's lives. 40 housing associations, I've kind of gone through that, and this is just a snapshot of those. What I'm interested in, this is the first time we're sort of doing a real housing specific session, is if you have feedback on this, or think there's any way we could do it in the future, perhaps more robust, really just do a housing event. I'm really interested to hear about that. So please grab me and we'll have that chat later on. So for me to kind of tee up then what I am talking to us about. 3 key things in terms of focuses and what we're faced with. The first being regulation changes. So obviously tenant satisfaction surveys being the big one. I think when we talk about that, it's obviously about driving CSAT, trying to get that satisfaction up. The only way we can do that is through trust. But then when I had a look at the kind of questions that are being asked in that survey, it's never directly asked about whether you trust the housing association. It's actually lots of small things that build up to what is trust, which I think is quite an important thing. When thinking about that theme, it's all the small things we do that has that end goal of people trusting us. There's also, on the same topic of regulation changes, tenants being equipped with their rights and knowing where to go with their issues, and basically being educated more about that. That creates pressure for us. It means idleness. It means that there's a big focus on getting things right. Self-service, lots of budget, digital transformation, going to things like portals, trying to get people to self-serve. The budget's gone into it, but then it often falls on the comms team or the service team to make people use it. How to actually deliver the ROI off the back of the portal that's been built. And then tenant experience kind of comes off the back of this. So if there's failure demand from the self-serve, it's going to obviously negatively impact the tenant experience. I don't know if anyone's got anything to add to that, but that's kind of just teeing up the 3 key things that I find that we talk about day to day in the sector. How do we support this then? So when I'm talking to seniors in QBR meetings, like quarterly catch-ups, the things they're asking me are, how do I listen to the voice of the tenant? What tools do you have to listen to that? I point them to, you've got all this data of comment sections, private conversations. That's where you can hear the voice of the tenant. How do I audit and do my compliance? If I'm ever asked for that request or something has got to a point where you're having to go back to audit, I need the logs of it. Signposting, again, it comes under making sure that we're pointing people and deflecting them to the way that they can self-serve. Real-time feedback is quite interesting because I think this comes under actually how often are you reporting, how often are you really digging into the numbers of what's happening on social. And then there's automation there as well. So how do I free up my team's time on FAQs and how do I pay my rent, how do I do this? So they can focus on those, I talk about the challenging conversations and the ones that are changing sentiment. They're the ones I want my team actually focused on. So, quickly go through these next ones, constant type for time. But this is my take on the three themes here, so engagement, learning and trust. I've looked at it from a comms perspective and from a service perspective. Essentially, these are the 3 things we need to have like a successful social media strategy. But then we hit with this this is the first thing that people talk to me about when we're thinking about like Facebook comments on, public appearance, brand reputation, and we're stuck on this thing that social media is a spectator sport, right? All eyes are on it, people can see what you're doing, your tenants can see how you're interacting with other people, and if I think anything stops changing housing, it's this. More so perhaps from the top, it might be different in different organisations, but how do we stop this being a blocker to actually making progress and servicing tenants? I took an example. This is a mocked-up example of a Facebook post that went out from HA. So breaking into the 3 themes. This is something that they do regularly. So they go out Monday morning, Friday, midweek, and they make it really accessible about how they want people to talk to them. So this is where we're available. This is where we've got capacity, and this is where we want you to handle your issues. So from a demand perspective, they're proactively managing it. They're actually saying, please come to us here and we will service you. They're building trust because they're being super transparent about it. They're even saying, drop a message in the comments, and we will get to it. So engagement is open, and they're not, there could be fear around this, because on the next slide you'll see why perhaps some people might think that this isn't the best thing to do. But actually they get some engagement. So they've got, and I noticed they have a regular engager that comes back and says good morning back to them. And they send a gift back, and it's like, it was nice to see that Housing Association could actually send a gift and engage with a tenant. It proves that there is a way to be human in some way. And then the next comment below is this. And the demand here has been failed on another customer service channel. So they haven't been able to get through to the phones, they haven't got email service, they've final port of call, I'm going to go to social. So you could say we've had that nice bit of engagement, and now suddenly everyone's got eyes on this potential issue. Trust broken, the engagement now we're on the back foot, having to be super reactive. But what I took from this, now they haven't responded in, so this is obviously me mocking up, haven't done it in 2 minutes. That would be amazing if they got back to 2 minutes. But the time, it was under an hour, which I think is impressive. They'd gone back, they were superhuman in their approach. I like that, even just a simple thing of putting their name there so people can refer to the person that's talking to them. The most important thing is that they closed the loop. So they said they were going to go and do something, and then they followed up and said, that's done now. And to me, if we could think of ways of closing the loop, that's one of the biggest takeaways. And it can be as simple as, the customer service team have said they're going to do something, and they followed up and said, check your inbox, we've actually done it. I don't know if anyone's got any thoughts on this. I know that Facebook as a channel, especially the comment section, is one of key interest. I've got some HAs that have them turned off completely, and others that embrace this. But yeah, I mean, if you do, jump in, but if not, for me, the win here is that they've gone back and they've closed the loop. Final bit then, so from a service perspective, if you haven't read this piece from Gavin, who's meant to be here today, and he's from United House, but his training was cancelled. But he's done a brilliant piece for us in Inside Housing, and he actually has labelled HAs as the 4th emergency service, which is quite a shocking title, but if you read it, he really goes into depth about how his team now having to be trained to handle really quite serious scenarios, to protect them at the first point of call, but also to make sure they're servicing the tenants. And he talks about how there's a change in sentiment, but also what they've done to kind of navigate it. So they've put in more channel options, they've surveyed to find out where their customers want to talk to them, and they've made sure that they've got the capacity and the structure to do so. But the most sort of thing that resonated with me the most was the second point there of building close relationships with trusted partners. So we're in a room today, obviously at Big Social, with local councils, police, NHS, charities. And actually I see us positioned, as Orlo, right in the middle of that we can start to, if we could build relationships with those people in the local area who service the public that we're talking to, actually how can we help achieve a better customer experience? So if they need to go to a local charity, to mental health support, if they need to understand that actually we don't look after bins, that's your local council, if you've got that working relationship with those comms teams, how do you improve that? What does that conversation look like? And the end goal there is obviously to increase your costs and your efficiencies. Because at the moment it'll be interesting how much of your time is spent on things that actually aren't something that you can solve or that you can handle and provide them with the right service. Final piece from me on that, it's almost like you're not doing that, and that can be a few things there. It's the response piece. It's keeping your public social comments open. It's having trusted partners in your area that can support you. Then what are you doing? This is a quote that came out of a conversation I had with a customer recently, and it sort of stuck with me. That they said that the most memorable thing we can do across all kind of age groups is respond to the customer. I think it was sort of touched on in that talked just at the beginning there, that actually, if someone's coming to you with a negative sentiment and you're ignoring it, actually the best thing you can do is respond to it, open up the conversation and see if you can close the loop in some way. So that's sort of my final piece. The next section is product. I guess we kind of keep thoughts in our head, and then at the end we've got some sessions to sort of perhaps open up the room to talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm the solutions consultant at Orlo. I work with the product team under Hardy, who might meet today, our head of product. And we spend a lot of time thinking about what we should build next, what are people actually asking for, and make sure that when we tell our devs to build something, we've got your interest in mind, so we're actually building the right things that are going to make your life easier. And also today, to help tackle those challenges around engagement, trust, and demand. So just to touch on some of the things Phil mentioned at the very start of today around engagement, demand, and trust. That's something we spoke about during our Orlo UK tour, which is one of the recent events we did up and down the country. So if anybody here attended one of those sessions, you might be familiar with this. But for today, we've taken it a step further, where we're looking at how those three actually interact with one another. And our vision and our position is, if you can nail the engagement and the demand side of things, the trust will come as a part of that. You can't create trust, it has to be organically generated. And by having a good control over your engagement side, reaching out to everybody in your audience, be it just members of the public, right, tenants themselves, and then dealing with the result of that properly, whether it's just managing the demand in a timely fashion, reporting on that demand, making sure people are positioned and have the skills they need to address topics coming in, especially based on what Rosie just mentioned about being that new, almost fourth emergency service, making sure people are capable of the tools to handle that demand, then trust is going to build off the back of that. And if you don't get these first two right, you're going to see a decline in the trust side of things. So why am I talking to you at the moment? This is what we are trying to achieve with Orlo and how we can hopefully help you manage those three areas. So just to run through these, improving engagement by being in contact with the entire community and providing a place where you can have that back and forth two-way conversation. Making managing demand as cost effective and as time efficient as possible by implementing AI technologies, managing your inbox, your inbound queue of messages and conversations properly, and perhaps routing them to individuals who are subject matter experts and most capable of handling particular conversations. And then measuring that level of trust over time. So if you're doing these first two, is it actually having an impact on trust? Being able to measure that, see if it's going up or down, and then drill into that information and understand what is actually driving that change, be it a positive or a negative one. And as part of all that, using our insights and reporting to look across everything, every channel of communication, and see what people are actually interested in, what their issues are, and then using that information to help build strategies to address that moving forward. So this is something we call our social maturity curve. It's built on the idea that when people either start using Orlo or start using a tool like ours, they often start down on their left side, and then the more they embrace social, the more they commit to it and give it the time and resource it needs, they slowly move up this chain here. So starting off with engagement being the focus, like creating content, making sure you're reaching your audience and putting that message out there. Then focusing on the demands, like you've done that now, you've reached people, and chances are they're all messaging you back in, so being able to handle that properly and then start to think about how that's managed across multiple channels, especially with new channels popping up every day and existing channels coming under not so positive spotlight at the moment, how that changes over time. And then moving on to the strategic trust side of things. So once you are starting to think more about the engagement and demand and measuring that, how does that actually impact trust? Is there then things we can understand from all the data we've collected, be it the outbound or the inbound, to help prioritize and set focus and targets up for the future of your engagement piece and what you can do to address key topics and issues. So specifically around engagement then, so a few screenshots here. If you're an Orlo customer, you might have seen visuals like this in the platform before. There are a few things you won't be familiar with because there are upcoming pieces around audience analysis. I'll talk a little bit around that as we go through. But being able to leverage the marketing and the campaign analytics to see what type of content is performing the best, what's resonating the most with your audience. So you can almost not reuse, but use that as a foundation or, again, your own inspiration for moving forward with new content. As part of our audience analysis work for our insights module, we're going to be identifying key influencers within your audience. So whether it's around follower count or engagement, being able to track who's actually bringing the most reach to a conversation, whether it's about yourselves or about a topic you're listening for, and then being able to actually click in and see what are they talking about. So this is my key influencer. Are they talking positively or negatively? Are there any common themes amongst our high influencer engagers that we can address? And then breaking out that audience into key segments. So we're going to start measuring trust within the platform. So obviously we're talking about it at all of our events. It's a key metric for us. We're adding that metric into Orlo. So using our sentiment and emotion analysis, we're going to feed back on trust, whether or not an individual is a trusting or a distrusting person, and what the key factors are behind that emotion, what's driving that, and being able to segment that out in using census data to say these key demographics, whether it's location, age, or gender-based, are the ones that are talking to you with this feeling, this emotion, or the most trusting or distrusting demographic audiences. So then you can use that to target them and address issues if there are any within them. From a demand perspective, we obviously have our universal inbox, which looks across all of the social channels that you'd expect, as well as things like WhatsApp, which we're seeing an increase in usage now, especially with people talking around Twitter or X moving in a certain direction. They're looking for a new channel to engage customers with on that private one-to-one basis. So we're seeing WhatsApp increase. We also pull in things like reviews from Glassdoor, TripAdvisor, Google, pulling those into the inbox, not only just to respond to, but also to report on as well. And then having things like automatic message routing, so looking at those inbound messages and automatically assigning them to individuals or teams based on their content. So if it's a particular complaint, or if it's a plumbing issue or a payment issue, making sure it gets to the right team if everybody's on the platform, tagging it in a certain way so you can then start to see, are we responding to certain issues faster? Are things like a certain topic or service also associated with a certain emotion or sentiment, and start to see what your key problem areas could be so you can address those. And then using our insights to alert you to new and emerging crises. So this is something we're adding into the platform where we can currently trigger actions to take place based on specific keywords. If it's a message from a particular individual, we're going to use our theme detection to alert you if something's almost kicking off as and when it's happening. So rather than after the fact reporting, you can be alerted to you've had X amount of new messages come in within this short space of time to do this new theme. Here's an email. Here's a Teams notification. Here's all of those things tagged and assigned to you. So you're not having to sit within the platform monitoring and refreshing. You can be alerted as and when things are actually emerging. And then using that social element to signpost your audience so they know exactly where to go to get the information they need to hopefully reduce that demand. And then use things like AI, so our chatbots across social and our live chat channel, to also help deflect demand when it comes to the FAQs, people asking about things where they spent a little bit more time, they could probably find info out themselves on your website. It's just giving them a nudge in the right direction to help save your team's time so they can focus on more important or pressing things. And then finally there on trust, just a quick visual of what that according to our trustometer is going to look like within the platform. So at a glance, being able to see overall, looking at all of the messages we have, these can be specifically around your inboxes, whether it's a particular social account or channel, everything, or your external listening, if you're monitoring through a particular topic, another HA, or anything across social press and media, being able to show you what the general consensus is there for trust. One, we have the number and a percentage, but then underneath that, being able to see what are the actual key themes within that. So we know 50%, minus 51% there for distrust. It's great as a number, something to look at, but without knowing what's causing it, it's kind of useless to me. But that's why underneath then we can see the top themes. Say, okay, we know there's minus 50% trust, and we know these are the key things causing that lack of trust. These are the key emotions. these are the key influencers or advocates or detractors around your organisation, clicking into that and then using that information to plan strategies as well to target and address those. And then just to finish off from me, just to give you an idea of our roadmap themes for the next year or so. As always, it's being able to integrate with new and emerging channels. So we very recently connected with Nextdoor. I think we're the first social media platform to do that. We have a very good relationship with them, and they're constantly adding new things to their API. It's becoming a very fast emerging channel. We're starting to see Nextdoor links on websites where you normally see like your social links underneath. People are also saying, and Nextdoor as well. And they're looking to add community management in there for targeting, messaging, and being able to report on all that. And for CRMs as well, so any third-party systems we integrate with. We do Dynamics, Salesforce and Zendesk currently, but we have scope to work with any third-party CRM system. It just might take a bit of legwork from our team to build that integration, but it's always there. So we just need to keep on top of that. Expanding on our inbox, so talking around chatbots and automatic message routing. We have something called push mode that enables chats to come in and be automatically assigned to available agents that have capacity. So you can have that and potentially spread the load, make sure everyone's getting a fair share of the inbound messaging, and just looking to expand on that because it's one of our key components within the tool. Insights there, so I mentioned a bit already around what we're adding to that in terms of audience analysis, but again, to just keep building on that and innovating when it comes to any new AI technologies we can use to help give you a better understanding of what people are talking about without asking you to sit there and read hundreds or thousands of messages to get an idea of what the key issues are. And then finally, more automation around that, so building our chatbots. As I mentioned, it currently sits across Facebook, X/Twitter, and our live chat service, but we're looking to also roll that out to other DM channels as well, so I'd expect some movement in this space around things like WhatsApp and Instagram.
So big thanks to Orlo, obviously, for inviting me here today to talk about some of the social media work we're doing at Longhouse Group. So I've kind of called this "Overcoming the Negative: The Social Strategy You Need to Hear." So it's a bit of a brave title potentially, but hopefully it's something you guys will take a couple of things away from it. Just a bit of information about me and I suppose why I might be talking and why you should maybe listen to me, or maybe not. But so I've been with Longhouse Group for about 6 years. Really responsible for launching their marketing team within the communications team. My main responsibility is bringing to market the new homes and affordable homes program that we've got. Also working across our care and support colleagues to market their services as well as our employer branding. Working on LinkedIn and those sorts of platforms, so on that B2B scale. Team are also responsible for things like insight and stakeholder comms as well. Before that, sort of 3 or 4 years prior to that, worked for a small local charity in the south of Birmingham, launching their digital marketing strategy and their social strategy for them. So also a big rebrand and website development. So loads of kind of work in the marketing and the digital space really for me for the past kind of decade or so, which makes me seem really old now saying decade, whereas I never used to be able to say that, I guess. So I want to start with this quote here. Now this it's a bit of a roller coaster. This talk you're gonna see us go down a little bit, but this is from Mark Constantine, the co-founder and CEO at Lush, and what he says is there's now overwhelming evidence we're being put at risk when using social media. I'm not willing to expose my customers to harm. So hold on to your boots. This is not kind of a talk about a strategy that's going to show you a new channel or a new matrix or a new technique. This is a talk about kind of a bit of trust, a bit of honesty, and a bit of moving forward and kind of where we are in at Longhouse Group in terms of our social media. So for us, and I think for many in the housing sector over the past sort of 3 years or so, there's been a bit of a perfect storm of we've had COVID, lockdowns, we've got people shortages across different parts of the industry, we've got inflation, we've got the housing crisis, and all of these kind of all of these things have created this perfect storm that has kind of added to general dissatisfaction across the industry. Customers are very unhappy in a lot of different ways, whether it's repairs or service failings overall. And that's a key thing within Longhouse Group. Some housing associations have done better than others, but particularly for Longhouse Group, we found there is higher dissatisfaction than there was 3 years ago. So Housemarque have said formal complaints have nearly doubled between 2021 and 2022, and it's simply down to more vocal, unhappy customers. So I guess from some of the looks, probably potentially people are in the same sort of situation with some of that stuff. Some people may have fared better, but that's kind of where we are as a housing association. I have put some pseudonyms on these, but these are some of the real comments that we've had from customers on our public social media. So some very unhappy customers. Overall, because of the situation that we're in at Longhurst Group, which is due to repairs backlogs and poor service in some areas, those complaints have made their way onto public channels such as social media, and obviously we are seeing the impact of that. For us, that's resulted in a huge increase in negative sentiment across our inbox and across the comments and engagement on those channels. So what was 12 months ago 20% negative sentiment is now 40%, so it's doubled in 12 months. So a real big impact for us as a comms team to make sure that we're able to kind of respond to those things, we're able to escalate it in the right way, and we're able to move things forward. And I'll kind of hopefully be able to talk to you about what we have done shortly. But this is as far as the roller coaster kind of goes down. Hopefully we're going uphill a little bit, but most of you will probably know what Lush did from a social media perspective in terms of coming away from social media for more recently, and they did come back a little bit in the pandemic, but sort of going down this route of saying social media is a bit of a dark and dangerous alleyway is kind of how they've put it on their internal challenges, saying we wouldn't ask our customers to go down those sorts of routes. So seemingly really negative at this point, but we are going to kind of get to a more positive point hopefully. So what do we do next? A really big thing that we did is we sort of said social media is still an open channel. So despite lots of pressure from around the business, particularly like customer services and some directors type above level roles where it's like, why are you posting on social media? It's really negative. Turn off comments. Don't do this. We kind of made the decision to say that yeah, social media is going to stay open. We want that two-way communication with customers, and it's really important that it's done in an open and honest place. So for us, yeah, we stuck forward and we've gone, yeah, we're keeping with social media and making sure it's still open to people. Within the comms team, a big part of what we're doing is looking forward and looking how we can improve the situation that we're currently in. So we're working with the guys at Orlo around live chat and chatbots is a big thing that we're looking at now. And we've done a bit of testing with those guys in terms of how that works and how that will integrate into the business. We know actually there's a big stakeholder piece we need to do internally to get something like that working right. So the little trial that we had that Ray's really helped us with was really beneficial with that sort of process. And a big one in terms of the integrations is making sure that all of our social interactions with customers integrate with our CRM, do a really good job of making sure we're tying up with that full kind of customer picture for colleagues that are dealing with customers day to day. For us, it's also been about making sure that we're sort of doubling down on the platforms and the content that's working really well. So if we are seeing content that's not performing well or is really negative, I'll kind of come on to it a little bit, but it's making sure we're focusing on the stuff that is working well. So sometimes that's easier said than done because you have to post certain bits of content, and some stuff is always going to be negative in terms of your service announcements and stuff like your telephones are down, whatever it is. People are on training, customer service desk is on training. You're always going to kind of like attract negative attention there. The last thing that we did, and this is kind of this is maybe one of the big kind of takeaways I want people to kind of potentially think about, is the power of pause. Really, I think I know that's often easier said than done, but pause. If things aren't meeting your expectations, think about, can we just pause it? Can we stop? Now I know that we said there's pressure from other people in our organisation, but where can you pause? What can you stop doing? What's not meeting expectations? What's not adding value to customers essentially? So I'm going to go into the power of pause a little bit. And I said I worked for Woodbrook, this small charity in the south of Birmingham. I met up with the CEO recently. I was doing some leadership training. I spoke to her around sort of what she did in terms of pause and discernment. And she sort of told me this. She said, your pause doesn't have to be something you spend a long time on. It's that little check, that little pause that sometimes asks you, are you pointing in the right direction? I think that's the best way of summing it up. I think if you've worked in marketing for a long time, the idea of pause and taking your foot off the gas on social channels is kind of not the norm, really. I think most of us who've worked in marketing, we kind of that old mantra of content is king. We need to find the best performing posts and keep pushing ahead with it regardless. But Sandra kind of really highlights the fact that actually the pause is that little look back, is the check over your shoulder. Are you doing it right? Does it add value? And my communications manager, Matt, is a big advocate for pause in this space. So what do we do next? So for us, our pause it's not a hard pause, not like Lush. We're not coming off these channels. It's us looking at us changing the remit on some of the channels that we're posting on. So Facebook particularly, I think those good news and PR stories, we know it's not the right time to be posting those on Facebook, for example, or Twitter in some respects, because we know they're not performing well and the sentiment's not there. So changing remit, our pause for us is changing remit. It's having a bit of time to look, investigate, see what's really working. And I suppose connected with pause is this continuation. What you're going to continue on, what you're going to carry on doing, and what you can do more of. On my side of things, it's particularly with the new home sales. We can see that the sentiment on new home sales and the engagement on those platforms is really, really positive. So actually what we've done is we've taken more time into those channels. So we've been able to double the output on those channels. So we've gone from about 500 posts a year to over 1,000 posts a year, and that's increased our impressions by over 250,000. So it seems really, really simple. Stop doing something on one and do more on the other. But it's a bit of a brave step sometimes to say, we're going to take a step back from here and do more on this. And we've been able to kind of show that actually works for us. And you will see here actually on on the left is the brand sentiment in terms of the engagement that we get on our social channels for things like LinkedIn and our Find a Home channels. So the negative engagement is actually very low. So yeah, it's less than 10%. So it's a big drop compared to the 40% across some of our main channels. So the engagement's worked. It's kind of been proof of concept, really. We've kind of moved away from those channels, and we've done less of the stuff that we know is going to get negative engagement. And obviously we can see actually it is more positive on those channels. But it's important to recognise there are risks, because just coming away from a platform and saying you're not going to do anything on it anymore, there is a risk. So for us, the risk could be that some of those channels just don't ever recover. If it's Facebook that we've moved away from, will that ever recover again? Will we just see declining engagement forever kind of thing? Will it just die as a channel that we use? And there's a big risk in that. Facebook obviously has seen declining engagement for years now, so that could just happen. It could just be the death of that channel, really. The second one is this idea of maybe we lose our mojo a little bit as a comms team or as a social team. Do we take our finger off the pulse a little bit, and do we not really kind of see those little intricacies that make a platform pop and work and really kind of perform? We're not living in that space. Do we just kind of take our eye off the ball with that? So there's a risk there that we're not kind of living in that environment that we need to be enough, and that could again damage our output further down the line when we come back onto the channel. The other risk is obviously customers are not silly, they're not stupid. They will find other routes to get in touch with you. So even if you've got a really good, really positive informing channel, they may navigate around and go to the channels that you are more engaging on, and obviously the negative sentiment may drop. So there is that risk there that we need to manage our expectations and know that there is a potential for us to have to kind of like root that out as well. It's a bit of a shocking one, but a toxic symbol, a toxic soup of a toxic can of soup. We may be kicking the can down the road in terms of negative engagement across the channel. So if we do start back up on certain channels, have we just kind of like kicked the can down the road? Is it going to be just as bad? And there is a potential to that. We may have just paused something but not really solved the issue. Obviously we've got to solve some of our service issues, but again, we may have those that negative sentiment just hanging around anyway. Looking forward, there's kind of three things that we know that we need to do, we need to move forward with to make sure that we kind of mitigate some of those risks. So a big one for us is making sure that we've got the right amount of resource in our team. So for us last year, that meant bringing on a dedicated social media officer. What was once a kind of a split role is now a dedicated role to look at social media and increase engagement. And it's also working with key stakeholders in the business as well to make sure that they've got the right resources to communicate on social too. So that might be customer services or lettings or income or whatever it is. If they're dealing with customer inquiries, can we get them on board and join the Orlo platform so we can meet those customer expectations where we need to. Secondly is obviously making sure we're investing in the right areas in terms of technology. So whether that is our chatbots or our live chat, make sure we get that right. Or across the Marcom's sphere of software. So whether it's our CRM or what email platforms or whatever it is, make sure actually we are maximising our customer engagement where we should be in those digital platforms. And this one is using insight. So I'm pleased in the previous slide they talked about having increasing the kind of the insight on the Orlo platform. Using insight to help us drive decisions properly and strategically is a key thing for us. So obviously if we're kind of coming back into certain channels, let's monitor the sentiment, let's see how the engagement's going properly, make decisions from there. We don't want to do any more anecdotal sort of changes and say we're going to come off this because it's just really negative, because we want to be really analytical with that, and we use all those platforms obviously every day, and it's really great for just monitoring what does and doesn't work very well. So just making sure we're definitely doing that is a big thing for us. And I want to leave on this. Many of you probably will have seen this little diagram before in terms of being 1% better every day. Particularly if you work in marketing, we're very good at kind of being innovative and pushing the boundaries on things and trying new ideas and not afraid to fail. And I think it's Forbes says that innovation is just doing something different that adds value. So within the comms team, obviously that's what we're trying to do. We've kind of got that mantra and that mindset. So innovation is not those giant leaps forward. It can be those little 1% increments that adds value. So I kind of want to leave you the idea of maybe a pause or something like that is that little 1% that you can try. Is it you take 2 weeks off on a channel and you just sort of test what impact does this have on our sentiment? What impact does this have on engagement? Can you change it? Can you change remit slightly? So these little 1% tests, if you're not doing it, it's very worth kind of like just investing some time into being able to do that. Pause one thing and then try some other things if you're not doing that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Connor. So we do have time for a bit of a Q&A. I guess covering anything that Connor's gone through or how we kind of teed off the session. I don't know if anyone does have any questions, or perhaps if it's not a question, is it a challenge that you could share? Just to kind of kick us off, really. I've got one. Go on then. I'm looking to you.
Just because I haven't seen Rosie's presentation before today, so I found that really interesting and alongside Con. But I suppose if everyone remembers from Helena's talk this morning, she spoke about obviously a different sector, but speaking about kind of ignore the negativity and focus on the positive quick wins. I suppose with your comment was close the loop every single time, I suppose putting it out to the professionals in the room. What is that you're currently doing in terms of when you do get a negative comment? Do you think it's best at the moment to ignore that and move on to those positive ones, or is it that you think it's best to kind of close that loop there and then with tenants?
Yeah, I'd say that as well, because I think especially with your presentation as well and previously, it's all exactly what the same kind of challenges I think I've faced, and it does then make I think there's a theme in housing of going through the same thing where you come across a sort of environment with a lot of negative sentiment, and then you're trying to then see how you can actually tackle that. Obviously in a housing association, in my experience at least, you can't necessarily just kind of come back with sort of a funny attitude, because a lot of these people are dealing with very real life problems. And as well, like, the topic of being sort of another emergency service channel, it kind of resonated a lot, because you do come across a lot of people that have a lot of situations with like mental health. We're going through that at the moment, where it's been a bit of a recurring theme, where someone comes in and you can really see the effect of living in one of our homes and also dealing with a lot of like mental health challenges. So we're seeing how sort of that can also be a lesson for us to actually really be more attentive with the mental health aspect of actually servicing customers and helping customers out as well, because a lot of people we work with and have as customers are here for a very long time in a lot of cases. So yeah, we've seen a lot of how we can kind of really be head on with a lot of these sort of negative comments we get, a lot of sort of complaints we get online. And yeah, I've found that with being head on and actually attending to each comment we kind of get and closing the loop that way has been a much sort of better approach than kind of ignoring it and maybe perhaps sort of seeing what happens later down the line, maybe, because it might be someone who perhaps has a complaint, but they're not necessarily getting reached with the complaint, so you think, oh, it's not going to attract attention, so let's just take note and then leave it or whatnot. I've kind of reversed that at work, I suppose, and said no, every complaint, every comment we really need to like actually attend to, because you don't know what the effect of actually going to that complaint and actually answering it and actually just having a conversation with the person will maybe unveil. So I think actually really going to each one and just having that conversation, I think making the time for it has made like a massive difference. And yeah, it's made a dramatic difference for our sentiment, to be honest. So I think that's definitely one thing that I'm sort of thinking.
Yeah, I think just on that, I mean, Henda's presentation was fantastic, but that was probably the one thing that I didn't agree with. And I think in a public sector, it's quite easy to say, I mean, if you don't like banana, don't drink our drinks. Like, that's quite easy. But if somebody comes to us and they've got damp or mould, that unfortunately could be a life and death situation, as unfortunately we've heard quite a lot about. And I think that's really important. And I think going back to what you were saying, I think what we found is, I mean, housing associations are very busy. There's people often go to a lot of different people about the same thing. And what we found is, unfortunately, is the way is if it's one of those things that teams need to work together, often a lot of that, sometimes the teams don't necessarily go to the right team or it gets dropped. So if we then come in and say we've had a complaint about X, Y, and Z, sometimes we can then bring something that was unfortunately forgotten up back again, and then that gets sorted a lot quicker. And we find that happens quite a lot. And that's no shade on all of the other teams, but unfortunately those communications do break down when teams have to. So when we come in and say that this is public, and I don't want to have to say just because it's public we need to get it sorted, but it does give people kind of the kick that they need to try and get these things sorted. And we actually, like you said, we have the opposite. A lot of the time they start off with negative and they go off positive because we've sorted something in a day that they've been trying to get for weeks to do. So I did agree with that certain thing, and we're like we respond to every single, unless someone's trolling us. Yeah. We respond to every single one that comes in, and we've been getting a lot of compliments because of that.
It's interesting. And do you feel like you have the ability to close the loop, or actually, you mentioned there like you're going to be dependent on other teams, other people in the business. So actually, what is your ability currently to do that? And is that actually, do we need to sort out our internal communications before we can fix that?
Absolutely, and there's some things that no matter how much you push internally, people are going to be like, well, it's not mine.
Yeah.
And then you are stuck, and you have to say, okay, look, let me try and get back to you, and things like that. And it is difficult. And sometimes just getting back to them, like, okay, somebody will call you. Somebody will call you in the next couple of days. If not, come back to us and we will make sure that that's sorted again. Yeah. So like, you're not closing for them, nothing's really changed, but on social media we are closing the loop, and we're saying that if it's not sorted, if you don't get called by Friday, come back to us and we can chase that back up to you again. That just makes them feel like somebody's actually listening as well.
Encouraging them to engage with you again.
Yeah, and there's going to be those people that you just, I mean, I'm sure we all have those names that we can say at the top of our head that as soon as they come through, you're like, yes, that's going to happen. You can roll out the red carpet and they're still not going to be happy. But for majority of the people,
I think also we've got a lot more proactive about signposting to complaints. So if colleagues can't get back to them, we also need to show that we're ready to accept a complaint and let's sort that out. And quite often that will go to manager level and they'll get a phone call and it's all sorted and everyone's happy. But I think just as you would say, actually you can go online and book your repair right now, an automated thing that says this sounds bad, I can see you commented before, you probably need to submit a complaint. While you're doing that, I'll get onto the team to get in touch with you. So we've become a lot more proactive about suggesting a complaint to customers.
But again, it's that transparency piece, right? You've seen that there's an issue potentially brewing because it's happened more than once, and you're able to say, actually, now you need to take this through. And maybe that is a large part of the job of a comms officer in housing. It's actually, where do I need to read you to get the service that you really need? You had a question?
No, I was just going to add on what you said. 95% of the time you can close it with a nice sort of comment that's sort of human, like you are interacting with each other. But then there are some people that just don't want that loop to be closed, and some of those people aren't even customers. They don't even know the product, and they're just there deciding they want to put their 2 pence in.
Yeah, angry on Facebook. Yeah.
How do you then perhaps mobilise people that? One of the things I always think is that probably one of those people that's really having a go at you is probably 10 other people that are really enjoying what you're doing, generally speaking, in life, right? Even in housing associations, I've just been in the police and things like that. We know you're at the sharp end of it, so I don't want to not recognise that, but actually you're doing a huge amount of positive for a huge amount of people as well, and you'll have a very small percentage of people, generally speaking, that this stuff, right? Most of it will be happening. So how are you thinking about, or are you thinking about how you sort of enable them to become your voice for you, rather than just coming from you? I've been reading this book by a guy called Seth Godin, and it's about enabling your tribe. And I wondered if you guys are thinking in that way. It's one of the things that I'm thinking about, like from a platform perspective, how could we do that? Like technically, how could we do that? And I wonder if you're thinking about doing that, or are doing it, and whether you've had any success with it.
Yeah, I agree, because I also, same book as well. It's a really, really good book, and I think the biggest thing was, again, we have, for the small amount of people that will be on social media, and from what we've, in our experience, a lot of those people are normally at the end of their tether. So that's when they come to us on social media, and we have this small group of people, but at the same time we also have a very large group of people that actually think we're pretty fair in a lot of different aspects and are quite happy with the service, and they will go quite a long time, sort of generally just okay, just satisfied and stuff like that. So I think what we do is a lot more of maybe in a more marketing perspective than a servicing side perspective. We do communications, like emails and small campaigns throughout the year, which highlight satisfaction, but on top of that, what we are doing to actually improve going forward as well. I think customers, and more from what we've seen in responses and stuff, they appreciate an actual acknowledgement of the next steps and where we are learning, where we are going wrong. We recently put that out, very recently, in a sort of annual report on what we have learned, and actually acknowledging that there are things we could do better, and seeing from that engagement has been higher in those campaigns. So that's something we actually can visually actually see that is working. So that's it. That's what we're sort of doing at the moment.
This is sort of a bit of a tangent, but I don't know if anyone's seen Apple's recent campaign that they've done. They've put Mother Nature in. Yeah. Big actress, I can't remember her name, but she sits there on this big board, coming to check in on all their pledges that they've made in terms of being, net zero, and you can tell that they're all kind of scrambling together to try and create their case for what they're going to do. And she sits there and they have to be really accountable, but they back it up with, how they're going to do it, data they're going to do it. And it's just, I think Apple have been quite brave in that they're literally, in this campaign, almost putting a light on the things that they haven't done, but how they're going to do it. And if we can take a lesson from it, I think we do a lot of that in internal comms. We tell the business, this is what we're doing, how we're getting there, but how much does that leak into what we're telling the customer or the tenant? It was interesting. I think there's something in that, So if we know that we're actually going to put structure in within the next 12 months, whatever that might be, actually can we update and tell the tenant that that's happening? Because it just reinstills that there is movement, there is change, and that we're being a little bit accountable for things that we've promised, that we know needs to happen. So if you haven't watched it, watch it. I think there's something that everyone can take from it. So how are we doing for time? When's the lunch break?
Lunch was 12:30.
Okay, where are we at? So we've got about 10 minutes. So the end of this session really, it's kind of some final thoughts, but we've touched on it there in terms of how do we make complaints everyone's business, but actually it's how do we engage the teams that we need, whether it's quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, to make sure that we can action what we're accountable for. Personally, I think that this comes down to your reporting, how you report and how frequently you're doing it. So typically at the moment you've got 32% of people doing that kind of weekly, and then 60% that are doing it daily. The rest I assume are not doing it as frequent. I'd be interested to know how frequently you report metrics. I know when I talk to customers, some are doing it, they'll report on their engagement stats, but actually from the customer service side on social, they're still not putting it anywhere, which is my challenge then, obviously, to try and encourage and make sure that there's real good learning in that data. And if you can start to say, actually, this is the average handling time of a private message, compare that to a 40-minute phone call, and suddenly you can put a cost and an efficiency to what you're doing as a team. So I'd encourage you to look at that. How frequently are you reporting and what are you reporting on? I used to work at an ad agency, and we were obviously targeted on what people would put out. They'd give us their budget and we were responsible for it. If they gave us a budget for brand building, I'd never report on conversions because it's not the objective of what I'm doing. So we'd split out all of our KPIs and our targets based on the objective. So if you can really think about your objective and make sure the target's relevant to that, then suddenly the story that you're building, what you're pushing back to in these business monthly meetings, quarterly kind of stakeholder meetings, you can hopefully be equipped to have those conversations. But goals should be relevant to what you're trying to do, and you could have multiple. It doesn't need to be just one. Also ask the customer, so surveying there. How frequently are you surveying the customer and asking them what they want? That's going to build up a kind of an understanding before they get that tenant satisfaction survey. You're already kind of prepped and you know what's coming, and you can hopefully do something about it. Some steps on how to kind of create a goal, but I've kind of just gone through that really. It's about pick one that's relevant. It's going to really encourage you to pay attention to the data, and that's going to drive change. A few things for what's coming up next year. Highly engaged audiences are cheaper to manage, right? It was touched on, I think, in Tender's talks. He sort of said, if people can start to do that engagement for you, you can kind of watch back and just watch it all kind of unfold. We've got some way to go in housing for that. But it comes under the advocate piece, and who are our key influencers? Who's going to post the GIF on the Facebook to say good morning to us, and how do we continue to keep them engaged? AI, how do we use that to support us, to give you the time to do the really important things? The 40-minute phone calls, the people who need our assistance, or helping them to deflect them to a mental health service where they're really going to be taken care of. WhatsApp and SMS, Ben touched on that. There's a huge growth in people interested in WhatsApp, one from a security point of view and a privacy, but also to have this new channel that works similar to like a live chat where you've got a one-on-one private conversation. And social listening. I think Ben's piece on insights touched on that. You'll have conversations that you're not aware of that are happening. There's data in that and there's learnings in that too. I want to finish on a bit of we can start it in the room, but I think actually take it away and do it in your teams as well. The question is, what is the cost of not changing? So when you put a business case together, or you start thinking about what you want in your budget next year, you often think about all the things that are going to do, like what it's going to achieve. So I want this because it's going to do this. But actually, if you switch the narrative slightly and say, well, actually, if we don't do it, this is what you're going to be left with, I think you start to have more impact, and you can start to actually put a value to it. So this is a social housing survey that went out. There were some results off the back of it. Across the UK, they were asked, what are your key budgetary focuses for the next 12 months? And these were all the things that they kind of addressed. I'd be interested to know, just having a scan of that, where you believe people's priorities and focuses are going to be. I won't make people put their hands up, but the results were 2 key things. You can just see that by the bubbles. Investing in stock, safety of homes, the efficiency of the homes, making sure people live in a decent home. Second to that, support and quality of service, which is where we really have the control. So there's going to be more put into actually what's causing our demand, a lot of it, and then how do we make sure that we're providing the right service. Now you might be looking at that and thinking, they said that last year. I'm interested to know from you, what did change look like last year? What did you set out to do and what did you do? And what does it look like in 2024? Now I don't know if anyone has anything that they could share in terms of what you changed last year, or what you're looking to do in 2024 onwards. So Connor sort of mentioned that he's been trying live chat and chatbot. They're looking to open that up as a new channel. It could even be a new content type or something that you're looking to just test the waters on. I won't put anyone on the spot. I'm looking at you, Jelani, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I think the biggest thing of last year was actually working on sentiment as a whole,
Yeah.
and also having like actual sort of established guidelines. I think we were very new still to social from a servicing perspective when I joined the company. So the main things we focused on was sort of really seeing how the tone and language of customer and emotion of customers were from just before we responded, when we responded, and whether they came back a lot, and a lot of customers were coming back a lot, to the point where it kind of did seem like some were trolling, they were just really unhappy. So we focused a lot on just improving sentiment. We got sentiment in a good place, and then we also worked on like sort of customer servicing SLAs. So how quickly were customer servicing responding to customers? What was the tone and voice of the customer service team? Really sort of worked a lot on that, reducing it a lot. And I think over the last year or two, it's just been it had been focusing on that, and now that's in quite a decent place, let's say, I guess. So moving forward, it's just about really sort of expanding on, I guess, reach, I'd say, really, and making sure like quality service is maintained while that expands, I think. And just always making sure that, I guess, sort of how we have our guidelines on customer servicing is just kept the same as we talk to more and more people, especially encouraging more two-way conversations, because again, when you do, you post more, you try and really talk a bit more about what the company's doing, you're naturally going to get more people to talk about, well, why are you focused on this issue I've had for 6 months? And then it's just being a bit more receptive to that happening, and then just being ready for it to happen, and then having, the guidelines to keep, I guess, us as a team protected while we keep doing it. So it's just focusing on that, really.
And when obviously there's a big part of that of working with customer service, do you find there's a resistance from them to, how do you tackle them feeling like they're potentially being watched, more eyes on them, or their work's going to be scrutinised a little bit more? Do you find that you really have to kind of build that up and build a case as to why you're doing it, the benefit of doing it?
Yeah, I think so, because the biggest thing is, for us anyway, it's just, I think the culture of things, we've seen, I think, the cost of not changing, and I think it's quite easy to then sort of establish and persuade people to make the change, because you can see how it's affecting the business. So from there, I think, it's pretty much just not really.
You kind of, once you put the business problem in front of it.
Yeah, it's been really clear to see for a lot of people, so I think there's been less pushback, I suppose.
Yeah.
And I think it's like what was said before in the first presentation of just, at the end of the day, it's kind of been a bit more about just apologising later and just making the change and saying, look, this is what's happening, you can see it here, and being kind of at least a bit protected with your team and being able to do that.
I've got a question for you. Sorry, I've been making this. You talked a lot about mental health earlier. A few people talking about that. We had a speaker called Kirsty Marrings on UK tour with us, who's did a lot about mental health on UK tour. And she says she's not a mental health advisor, but she's sort of a well-being practitioner. One of the things that I want us to do better as a company is share content with you that we think works. So would it be helpful if we shared with all of you some sort of best practice and stuff like that? So we've got access to guides, not just for your customers and tenants, but also for your staff. So if we shared more stuff around how you can support your own support teams and things like that, would that be the sort of content that you guys like to have, receive from Orlo?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Going back as well to Gavin's piece in Inside Housing, they put together a duty of care kind of policy for their staff. These are frontline people that are handling these topics. So they've put together a whole process of what happens when you have a bad call or a bad engagement in a Facebook DM. You go, you take a break, you grab a colleague, and it's put in writing and it's made official. And I think there's something to be said for actually letting your team know that they're okay to do that, and So I'll share that piece around so anyone who's kind of attended so you can read it. But also Gavin's a really great, similar to Connor, he's a notes with us, and I'm sure if anyone wanted to kind of chat to him, he'd be more than happy to. But yeah, I'll make sure everyone has access to the piece. Final thing, and this is a takeaway, right? So cost of not changing, risk of not changing. It's actually a task that we do as a team to sort of think bigger picture about our industries, also how we work internally. So you pick a scenario and then you split it into two things. So I've picked one here as just an example. So your Facebook comments are currently off and somebody's saying, no, we need to turn them back on. The risk of changing that, and it's probably going to come from the top, with someone who's just completely stuck on the idea that it's bad and we're not going to do it. The reason why we need to discourage spam and trolls. We have to protect the brand's protection, and we need to save time because we'd have to do the moderation on the channel, as examples. But then the risk of not changing, we start to think about, and this list, you could just from a visual have one that's a lot longer than the other, but you're going to have no real-time customer feedback. You lose the trust of the tenant because we know that transparency builds trust. And the demand is most likely to be shifted to a more expensive channel. And once you start, very simple layout of thinking, actually, what's the risk of not doing this? You again go into that meeting with a lot more kind of to back you up in terms of, you think like this, but this is actually the real scenario. It comes back to that reporting piece. But yeah, it's something that we do. We pick different scenarios and we just kind of break out and then share what each other's thoughts are in terms of risk of changing, risk of not changing.